Okay, Ms. Terry, you're on.
Good afternoon. I'm Melinda Terry. I'm the Executive Director for the California Central Valley Flood Control Association, and we represent over 70 reclamation districts, cities, and counties that have flood control responsibilities in the Central Valley, including in the Delta. And welcome to our new council member. And I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm probably going to use a lot of acronyms, but that's kind of the nature of the beast that we're dealing with, so I apologize in advance for that. I've said this many times to this council before, but one of the issues for reclamation districts who are doing levee improvement projects is that we have to mitigate under those already under CEQA. Meanwhile, we have 5 county habitat conservation plans, HCPs, and then we have one large regional one called BDCP, which is overlaying. And by definition, those habitat conservation plans set aside lands that you cannot use for any other purpose, including if you need to mitigate. So when you do the overlay, we in the Delta who have these projects, in my case, my members have levee improvement projects, there's not a lot of land left to mitigate with. And this particular regulation requires you to either regulate or mitigate, so that's going to impact us. And in the North Delta in particular, 1 out of 3 acres, because there's over 100,000 acres identified in some plans like the BDCP, that's like 1 out of 3 acres. So 1/3 of the North Delta, for instance, could potentially be off limits, and that doesn't count the local HCPs. So you can see it really leaves us limited areas to be able to go after other mitigation as proposed in this. Currently, these levee improvement projects are required to mitigate to a level of insignificance under CEQA, and if the project is being done under the Delta Subventions Program, then the project must additionally contribute to the net increase in habitat in the Delta. Now, under this section, a levee improvement project on an existing levee being done to comply with maybe state law to meet the 200-year urban protection requirement under SB 5, or maybe one of the projects identified in the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan that was approved last year, or to meet FEMA standards to qualify for recovery money after a failure, or to maintain eligibility in the U.S. Army Corps' PL 8499 program for federal recovery money after a failure, or maybe to improve a higher earthquake standard in order to improve water supply reliability for dual conveyance. Any of these projects will have to avoid or mitigate beyond the CEQA and the Delta Subventions Program that I mentioned in order to not preclude or otherwise interfere with the ability to restore in areas that are an opportunity to restore as identified in the Department of Fish and Wildlife Plan. The problem with that is when you look at that plan, it actually includes many habitat projects and specific areas and acres that are also part of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. And as you know, that is actually a permit. The BDCP is being done for 2 reasons. One is some of the projects are being done to meet the habitat acre requirements and federal biological opinions for jeopardy caused to certain fish species from the operation of their current South Delta CVP and State Water projects, and to serve as an incidental take permit for the continued operation both of those facilities and the new North Delta intakes. So many of the habitat acres in the Department of Fish and Wildlife Plan are for ESA take permit requirements for existing facilities or are expected to be credited to the applicants of the BDCP as meeting recovery goals under their HCP and CCP law. Under what authority does the DSC or any other government agency have the right to require people in the Delta to protect areas that are planned potentially to be used to meet permit requirements to benefit people in communities outside of the Delta? The burden and cost of the regulation should not fall on in-Delta people, particularly for mitigating for opportunity areas that will be used as credits in an incidental permit that benefits people outside the Delta.
Ms. Terry, are you urging us to change either delete the regulation or change the Delta plan to not even identify any area for potential habitat protection?
No, I'll get there if I can continue. Thanks. The Delta Reform Act has language in several places, including the goals of the Delta Stewardship Council, to improve flood protection by structural and non-structural means, to ensure an increased level of public health and safety, and to reduce risk to people, property, and state interests in the Delta by effective emergency preparedness and investments in flood protection, and to protect and enhance the unique cultural, recreational, agricultural values of the Delta as an evolving place. As the Economic Sustainability Plan that was submitted to you by the Delta Protection Commission pointed out, maintaining and improving the Delta levees is a critical component that actually contributes to all three of those co-equal goals. So, by definition, levee improvements contribute to those co-equal goals, yet now we're going to be required to mitigate. It doesn't make sense for you to apply this, in particular the levee program improvements that are going to contribute to those three co-equal goals, in addition to, I don't know if you can, if they're BDCP type things. And it doesn't make sense in particular because these are opportunities for habitat. So that's a maybe, iffy, someday, might, but it's not an actual thing. It's actually almost a capricious mandate, if you will, because they're subject to change. For instance, what if we're lucky and the species actually start recovering? That's going to significantly reduce those areas. The plan will be changed. But meanwhile, you will have had people pay for mitigation.
What do you want us to do?
I'm not exactly sure what, you might need to point it in a different direction of how this is going to be achieved, I guess, is the biggest thing, because I'm unclear of why the people in the Delta, particularly, as I said, if there are projects that are benefiting water exporters pursuant to their BDCP, why we should have to mitigate because they need to maintain that opportunity for that habitat because they have biological opinion ESA take permit requirements.
Okay.
It's also kind of self-defeating that as you create more of the habitat, then there's less available, which is how I started off saying it. We're kind of stuck in that loop that we're now mitigating for some potential ahead, but now we've lost more mitigation areas for us to do our levee improvements, and as those plans come into place, they're eating up more of it. So at some point, we kind of run out because we're not allowed to mitigate outside of the Delta. So at some point, we're just going to run out of places to be able to mitigate. So it's unclear why it's being applied to levees, in particular if we're actually kind of contributing to your three co-equal goals. But also, I just would think of other Delta people. I'm not clear how it could be legal for them to have to mitigate to maintain an opportunity for projects which are benefiting people outside of the Delta.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Terry.